Hey guys, absolutely awesome to have you here today. And in this video, I'm going to get into a ton of detail, crazy detail on the setup. So we're going to work from ball position, how wide or narrow our stance, what our shoulders are doing, do we line up left or do we line up right, and we're going to talk about how each of these is going to affect your ball flight and your shot. So we're really going to dive into the details here, answer a lot of your questions. This isn't something that you have to work through. This is one of those videos you can sit back and realize the cause and effect that's in the golf swing. So let's dive right into it and start out with ball position. This will be a topic that a lot of people debate. Now, in general, anything off the ground, we're essentially going to hit down roughly the same amount. So if we're hitting, say, a 3-wood, we're hitting down about 2 degrees, negative 2 degrees. So the ball or the club is coming down and contacting the ball, and then it's contacting the ground. So even with a 3-wood, you want to brush the turf, almost get a little bit of a divot if the ground is kind of soft. With an iron, your steepest iron, a pitching wedge, you're only hitting down about 5 degrees. So it's not a lot of difference between, uh-oh, my flight scope fell down here. We'll get to that later, hit some different shots, but not a lot of difference between a 3-wood and a pitching wedge as far as how much we're hitting down into the ball. So let's go ahead and hit one here, and you'll see with a 7-iron, I'm gonna take a slight divot. I'm gonna play the ball kind of off my left ear or just the left side of my chin. It's almost in the middle of my stance, just slightly forward of center. And this is pretty much where I would play anything off the ground. So again, 3-wood all the way to pitching wedge. We're gonna play it roughly the same address position. So in that one, hit it nice and straight. We'll see that I took a little bit of a divot there. Same thing with the 3-wood, same thing with the pitching wedge. If it picks up my angle of attack here on flight scope, yeah, so negative 5.6, I may have hit down a little bit too much into that one, but that's not very much difference. If you think about a clock face, 1 minute on a clock is 6 degrees. So we're hitting down 2 degrees with a 3-wood, we're hitting down 5 degrees with a pitching wedge. I mean, that's half a minute on a clock difference. There's not very much there that's happening. So if you're a little bit too far down, a little bit not enough down, it's not going to be a big deal. Now, if we move it back in the stance, so let's say this is my normal ball position. If I move it back in the stance, a few things are going to happen. Number one, if I make that same swing, I'm going to have to hit down a lot more. The farther that ball gets back in my stance, the more my club is going to have to be coming on the downswing to contact the ball. It's going to eventually, or it's going to basically make a steeper divot. If you tend to fall back, I see a lot of players do this. So they'll put the ball back in their stance, and now they start to fall back to the right side and fall away from it on their back foot. So if you have a reverse pivot, let's say that you're kind of leaning this way and then falling back, you'll probably find yourself wanting to put the ball farther back in the stance. So if we want to fix that reverse pivot, we want to get that correct contact, that's one thing you're going to want to look at. I would want to play that good ball position more toward the middle or slightly in front of my stance. If I keep on playing it back here, the only way I'm going to be able to make solid contact is to fall back. If I make that good weight shift, I'm going to swing right over top of the ball and hit it thin. So let me just go ahead and show you, if we make a good swing, how we'll take a steeper divot with that ball farther back in our stance. I'll actually keep the ball here and I'll just move everything forward. We'll also notice on my flight scope, that's going to show a more negative angle of attack. And it's going to tend to, because this swing is on a hula hoop or a hula hoop type shape. So if you imagine this is a circle coming back and then coming back into the inside, the farther I move this ball back in my stance, the more I'm going to want to swing out to the right. And the farther I move it forward, the more I'm going to swing it to the left. So what we'll see with this one, I'm going to hit down more now the ball's back in my stance, and I'm going to tend to draw this ball a little bit more with it back in my stance. That's exactly what we saw. To me, that doesn't feel very good. I felt like I had to flip a little bit to really not chunk that. So you may not actually see a lot more of a negative angle because I did flip to compensate. Yeah, still negative 9.6, so too steep on that one. So in a nutshell, the farther the ball goes back, the more draw, the steeper down into it. Now, draw probably sounds pretty good, but we're gonna lose a little bit of distance because we're gonna, tend to mishit them a little bit more coming that negative angle of attack, because I have to hit the ground and the ball right at the perfect time. If I hit a little behind it, that club coming down steeper, I'm going to chunk it a little bit more often. Now on the other side, playing the ball farther up, well, you take that same hula hoop example, my club's going to be wanting to move back up and to the left. I'm going to tend to fade the ball, and I'm also going to tend to hit it a little bit higher. So if I have my iron up here, that can be a recipe for real short iron shots. I'm going to tend to hit that ball a lot higher. On that one, I kind of flipped it up. It faded a little bit, as you'll see on the flight scope, and that ball went short of the green. So on that one, my flight scope says, let's see if we can get the maximum height. So a -3 angle of attack, a little bit shallower. My height, see if I can find, was 88 feet. Say my max height. On the one before that, the draw, my max height was 76 feet. So I went 10, 12 feet higher. On my draw, my carry distance was 186 with a 7-iron. On my fade, it was 168. On my first ball strike, my straight one, it was 187. So you can see I lost some distance when I played that ball up in my stance. And again, it's not really the best way to do it, because if I play the ball up in the stance, I have to pick that ball clean. It's really hard to hit down and through slightly and get that good negative angle of attack so I can catch the ball crisp. So that's ball position. Let's go over a bunch more things here in our setup, and I'll just keep hitting some shots and talking about how they affect your swing. So the next one is going to be your feet. How wide or narrow should I be? This is a question I get all the time. Should I take a slightly narrower than shoulder width stance, like a lot of people are going to say? That helps you to stay centered, helps you to rotate in the shot. Or should I get more of a wider, more powerful stance? Well, somewhere in the middle would be best, in my opinion. If I'm hitting with this narrow stance, what you're going to find, I'm going to exaggerate here and go real narrow, but if I swing and try to hit this, I'm going to try to hit a good shot here. Let's just see what my club head speed is. I feel like I really can't wind up and crank that ball. I hit it pretty good, nice and straight, and I hit it pretty solid, but again, it went a little shorter than the ones that I had before. I could see it there short of the green, and that one was 90 miles an hour, club head speed 166. Just I couldn't really feel like I could compress it. Now, if I go ahead and take a wider stance, I'm going to get real athletic here, nice and balanced. Now I can really load up into the ground, swing on through. Let's go ahead and try to swing hard from here and see how much club head speed I can get. And I completely missed that one. That was one of my worst swings, but it actually got to the green because I had more power. 90 on the one before, and that one the club head speed was 96, so almost 96 and a half, almost 7 more miles an hour of club head speed by widening up my stance. That's just because I was more athletic and more powerful. So what I'd recommend is finding somewhere in the middle ground. The narrower we get, typically we're going to have less power because we can't push our feet in the ground and rotate our body as much. Imagine standing like this, you're not going to have very much power. That is going to make it easy to rotate in the swing though, because now I can really rotate easily. As I widen my stance, now I'm going to have more power, but if I go too wide, now I can't rotate. I feel like I can't finish my swing. So I like to say a little bit at shoulder width apart or a little bit wider than that. If we go to the driver, I would rather see a much wider stance and really go ahead and get some power into that rather than a narrower stance. So a little wider for the driver, everything off the ground, again, 3 wood all the way down to the pitching wedge. We're going to use about the same width stance. If we go to a short wedge, so let's say that we go over to a sand wedge or lob wedge, something along the lines of that, or chipping or pitching, then we can narrow it up if we're just hitting a chip or a pitch shot, because I'm not worried about speed. I don't have to worry about how fast I can swing if I'm only going 30 or 40 yards. I just want to be accurate, and keeping my feet closer together allows me to keep my balance, allows me to keep my low spot a little bit more stable, and it helps me to rotate. That's a big thing, is you want to rotate in those short shots. You don't want to feel like you're just using hands and arms and pushing through there. So let's move right on here. The next one is going to be open and closed with the stance. This one's pretty simple. Typically, if I go a little bit more closed with my feet, so if I have my feet pointed more to the right, if I'm looking from down the line, that's going to promote a more inside-out path, or a path more swinging to the right. As I release that club head, that's going to make it a lot easier to hit a draw. So I usually line up about where I want the ball to start, and then I go ahead and let it work back toward the center of the target that I'm hitting toward. So that one drew, pretty nice straight shot. Caught that one really solid, right in the left center of the green. If I want to do the fade, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to open up, aim to the left about where I want the ball to start, and then I'm going to swing and hold that face a little bit open. There we go, and that one faded. Didn't hit the best shot there, but it's still on the green. Had a little tiny bit of fade on it. Typically, if you play the ball a little farther up in your stance, it's going to be easier to fade. And if you play it a little farther back in your stance, it's going to be easier to draw. And that's the reason we talked about earlier, whereas the farther back, the more I'm going to swing to the right, the farther forward, the more I'm naturally going to want to swing to the left. So those are all handy when playing different types of shots. If you're playing a fade, a little open, a little bit forward in the stance, maybe a ball forward. So if this is my normal ball position, having it forward just one ball is about all I need to be if I want to hit a nice solid fade. So the next thing here, what about our hips? How do we get our hips set up correctly? So I'm just going to work from the ball, feet, hips, shoulders, arms, go all the way through the entire setup. As I stand straight up and down, what I'd like to have here, if I want to be in good posture, is just grab kind of a club across my hips, and I'm going to push that club back, and I'm going to keep my legs staying fairly straight, my upper body staying fairly straight, and I'm going to go until I feel like my arms would be able to hang down in front of my body. So I'm just going to let those hips bend and then get a little bit of knee flex, and that's a pretty good posture. What I don't want to do, so what's happening there is my pelvis is rotating forward. What I don't want to do is keep my pelvis still, squat down. So now my pelvis hasn't moved at all, and now I'm just all rounded with my shoulders. What that's typically going to have happen is I'm going to start using too much hands and arms and kind of slapping at the ball rather than really getting a good rotation and making a good solid shot. So in this one, I'm going to kind of tuck my hips under to where I'm bending all from my shoulders. You'll see some players that have this kind of posture where their hips aren't tilted forward. And now I'm going to typically use all hands and arms. And it's hard for me to hit the ball at all. Just obviously didn't hit that very good. And my club head speed went way down. See what my club head speed was on that one. Went all the way down to 89. So one of my slowest club head speeds. If I do this correctly and tilt forward, now I feel much more athletic. My hips can rotate a lot easier. I can get a big turn going back and through. And let's go ahead and give it a good rip here. See what kind of club head speed we can get. I'm gonna go a little extra on this one. A little thin on that one. Not my best swing, but I had some good speed on it because that one flew all the way to the back center of the green, right at the flag. Let's see what my club head speed was. 99 miles an hour, so that's about getting close to as fast as I can swing a 7-iron unless I just really go crazy at it. So having those hips tilted forward, your pelvis tilted forward, that's happening from the hips and not from the back and the shoulders, makes it a lot better. The next thing there, what about my tilt from the hips? So side to side tilt. So if I'm setting up this ball, I got this tilt forward. What about, is my left hip higher than my right hip? Is my right hip higher than my left hip? It's going to be pretty level. You're going to have a little tilt from the upper body, which we'll talk about here in a second. So your hips are going to bump a little forward, and your weight's going to be, your upper body's going to be a little back, but they're going to be fairly level. If anything, my left side of my hip is pretty square, or pretty level, if not a little higher on the left side. Another thing that I see a lot of times is players will be struggling with a slice, and they'll tend to get their hips open right from the address. So we'll get to this in a minute with the shoulders, but as my upper body gets a little too far to the left, my right arm kind of gets high here. That's very much a slice position. And if you look from down the line, you're going to see my hips are left, and so are my shoulders. My shoulders are pointing left. And that's just setting me up in a position where I'm going to slice right across this. So you want to make sure that you keep your hips square at address. As you bump those forward, they may even feel a little bit closed to you, but I don't want to get this way and have my hips open, or I'm really going to struggle with that slice. So that brings me to the next thing is, what do my shoulders do? And that's a big piece with it. If my shoulders and my spine are tilted away slightly, that puts me in a position where now I can come from the inside and I can very easily come down in the slot, deliver the club squarely to the ball, and then hit a nice straight shot. If my upper body doesn't have that tilt, so if you want to measure this, go ahead and grab a club, put 1/2 on your belt buckle, 1/2 on your shirt buttons, and tilt until that would be hitting the inside of your leg. So you can see my head of my club hits inside of my leg. My chin is behind the ball, my eyes are looking behind the ball. That's a good amount of tilt to come into this ball really nice and square. If I get this way and I tilt too far forward, now I'm setting up to hit across the ball like we just talked about. If I get too far the other way and I really tilt my shoulders, I really get back here like this, now it's going to be very easy for me to come too far from the inside and too shallow. I'll end up picking the ball, and it's better than being this too far forward, but it's still not the optimal way of doing that. So get that little bit of tilt. That's going to get you to come in nice and square. It's going to square up the hips and the shoulders. You're going to hit a lot of great shots from there. Now, what about, should I be rounded? And the rounded from the shoulders, like we just talked about, has to do from where I'm bending from. So if I'm keeping my entire body straight and I just round my shoulders, Well, now I'm not in a very athletic position. I can't move my hips like we talked about. I have to get my hips to bend to be able to keep those shoulders fairly flat. Now, I'll tell you one thing I'm not real big on. If you have a little arch in your back, I don't think that that's a little rounding in the shoulders. I don't think that's the worst case scenario. The only thing I would say is if I get too rounded, then it's very tough to rotate again. My spine is kind of crunched in and it doesn't want to rotate. If I can keep that at least fairly flat, now as I go to the top of the swing, I can really rotate. The reason is your thoracic spine, which is in the middle of your spine, around here, that's where you get most of your rotation from. And if that's kind of bent forward like this, each individual vertebrae doesn't want to rotate as much. If I keep good posture, I can rotate a little bit more. So again, that comes from the hips and a little bit of tilt with the shoulders. You're going to be in perfect position. Now, the open and closed, just like we talked about, the more closed I get with my shoulders, typically the easier it's going to be to draw. If I get this way, that means a little more tilt. The more up and down I get, the tougher it's going to be to draw, the easier it's going to be to fade. So if you're struggling with a slice, get a little more. If you're struggling with a hook, get a little bit on top. You're probably overdoing one or the other. Now, if I really want to draw again, what I would do is I would set up my feet to the right, my hips and my shoulders to the right, and now when I swing, it's going to be much easier to go that way. If I want to hit a fade, feet to the left, hips and shoulders to the left, and then I'm going to swing and let the ball fade back that way. So don't be afraid to adjust your feet, hips, and shoulders to the right or to the left to make the fade and the draw easier if you want to hit one of those types of shots. So lastly here, or second to last, let's go over the arms. Now, how do I want those to hang? Again, if I'm too far away from this ball and I'm kind of rounding from my shoulders, then my arms are going to hang way out away from me. The tough thing with this, again, is I'm going to end up using too much hands and arms and not enough body rotation. I'm going to lose some speed. I'm going to lose a little bit of distance there. So I want to make sure that I get set up in a position where I hinge from my shoulders. My arms can kind of hang down from my shoulder sockets, and now I'm in a good position to where I can swing nice and fluid. So if I'm too far away, I'm going to be rounding my shoulders, extending my arms too much, and I'm going to be using kind of too much arms. I won't get as much distance because I'm not going to use as much body. If I go ahead and get too close here, now my hands and arms are going to be in the way, and typically what happens here, what I see, is players will come over the top, move their hips out of the way, and then swing across the ball because they're too close to it. A lot of times in beginning players, I'll see them crowd the ball because they feel like the closer they get to the ball, the easier it's going to be to hit, and then their arms are in the way. If I came from the inside, it would be very tough to not hit my leg. So typically what's happened is they come this way and then come over the top. So if you're hitting that slice, be sure that you're far enough away to let your arms swing from the inside, come from the slot, so to speak, and be able to hit that nice draw. Now, how much forward shaft lean should I have, or how far forward should my arms be? So a lot of times you'll see players that have the club here at address, way up forward. Now, I don't think that's the end of the world. That's probably not the best place to have it. Typically what's going to end up happening is golf is a game of momentum. So if I get the club way forward already, as I start to take the club back, I'm going to set the wrist really early, and I'm going to tend to cast on the way down and flip the club a little bit. So let's go ahead and show you what that would look like. I'm going to be way forward, pick the club up, and then I'm going to scoop it as I'm coming through. That ball went very high, and I lost a lot of distance. So again, I can see that ball is well short of the green, whereas my better struck shots are more toward the center or the back of the green. If I look at the height of that shot and the overall distance, we'll see that that's definitely down. 86 miles an hour club head speed, 150 distance, all the way down from 187, 188. So I really lost some distance on that one. Now, if I go too far the other way, I could just get a little too handsy. So if I have my hands behind the ball, what's going to happen is I'll get a little handsy coming through there, and it moves around quite a bit. So in a nutshell, what I recommend, after we get our good posture, our good address, just have the hands slightly forward. So if that's straight up and down, just a little bit forward is fine. That's going to put you in a good spot to where you can be nice and consistent. Let's go ahead and see if I can hit another good one from here. There we go, a little left, but I crunched that one. That's probably the longest one so far. And that actually went a little bit over the green, so I swung a little too hard on that one. So the last piece here, and I think one of the most important ones, is what are we doing with our left and right elbows? And this is where I see a lot of players get off track when they're hitting a slice or when they're hitting a snap hook. If I'm hitting a snap hook, let's start with that one. Typically, my left hand is going to be really strong and my left elbow is going to be pointing out more to the right. And what happens there is this puts my club in a position where I can really roll those wrists. If I get my left elbow out like this, I can really snap hook that thing and really get that ball turning over. Let me show you one that would look like that. My left elbow, instead of being kind of pointed toward the target or a little in, it's going to be pointed way out to the right. And now I can really get that ball moving from this position. That ball hooked 40, 50 yards, probably into the weeds over there. Yeah, almost in the weeds, 50 yards left of the green. So it's really easy to get that club turning over and overhook one from that position. So what I'd like to have happen with my left arm is, as I set up, as I let my arms hang naturally and my shoulders are kind of down and in, my left elbow is going to be pointing kind of back and inside to about a 45 degree. You'll hear some people say, really tuck your arms in, have your elbows to your hips. That's not very natural. I don't see pro players doing that. We're just going to let that hang about this way. What I don't want to do is get it way out that way. If I get it more in and I kind of tuck everything into my hips, what's going to end up happening is I'm just kind of locked in here. I can't use my arms and I won't get as much speed. So what about that right elbow? And this is one of the most common ones I see when players are slicing, they're losing a lot of distance. We need a little bit of work on this right arm, this right elbow. So when the right elbow is on top, or the right hand is on top, so if you imagine I put this hand on top more, if I have my right elbow kind of facing out this way or that direction a little bit more, what that does is that puts my right shoulder higher. Now look at that, I've got my tilt to the left. That's going to be a slice. I've come in more steep when I'm tilted that way. My right shoulder and both of my shoulders are lined up more left. My hips are lined up more left. And I'm just going to lose a lot of power and distance having that hand on top. What I'd like to do is have that hand a little bit kind of at a 45 underneath. So if you can imagine the palm of my hand at a 45, then I take my grip. That's going to be a pretty good position there. You'll see that the thumb is kind of going up toward my right shoulder, roughly in that area. And if you look at my elbow, it's kind of back at a 45, just like my left elbow was. I don't want it crammed all the way in there, or I could start to hook a little bit too much. So I don't want to overdo this and be way under, but just about a 45 with the hand and the elbow. Now I'm at a position to where I can hit some solid shots. So let's recap on this and talk about the whole thing from start to finish. The bullet points are actually pretty quick here. My ball position, everything off the ground, is going to be a little in front of center. If I go to the driver, I can bring it up toward the left heel, but everything off the ground from 3-wood to pitching wedge is always going to be a little bit front of center. From there, my feet are going to be shoulder width apart roughly, or a little bit wider if you're going to go air one way or another. My hips are going to bend forward to get that posture. My spine is going to tilt away, so now I'm set up well. My arms are going to hang from my shoulders, so just going to hang kind of straight down. My left elbow is 45 degrees out. My right hand is 45 degrees and my right elbow is 45 degrees. And now if I get those set up nicely, it's going to be easy to hit those good, solid shots. All right, guys, get that set up down, golf gets a lot easier. Now to wait right there, I've got an awesome bonus for you. We mentioned having that spine tilt away, and what I call this in the Top Speed Golf system is the stable fluid spine, meaning my spine's tilted away. As I go to the top of the swing, my spine is still tilted away, and as I come down into contact, my spine is tilted away, and it allows me to stay really stable throughout the swing, to not move around and get a lot of inconsistency. I'm going to play a preview of one of my best videos from the stable fluid spine. If you go ahead and click the card that pops up on your screen or the link down below, you'll get instant access to that video. You'll start making your golf swing a lot more consistent. Let's go and get started. Allows us to have consistency in the golf swing. And what is it that allows that consistency to fall apart and create some bad rounds? That's what we're going to talk about in this video today. Let's go ahead and get started. Everything that happens in the golf swing is initially dictated by what happens with the spine. So if we're looking at a skeleton, my spine's in the center of my body, and everything else in my body is attached to my spine. So my shoulders are attached to my spine, my arms attached to my shoulders, and then my arms are going to be actually swinging the club. Now when I see players that are really struggling, those guys that are hitting it out in the woods right, they're hitting in the left, then they have a few good holes, what's happening is their spine angle is changing. As they go to the top of the swing, maybe they have a reverse pivot, spine's angled back, falling back to the right, but there's a lot of inconsistency in that. And what happens is, as good athletes as we all are, the #1 fundamental in golf, correct, keep it nice and stable, but fluid, we're going to be able to hit those good clean shots time and time again, and that's what I'm going to show you in this series of videos. Henrik Stenson, top 5 in both driving distance and accuracy. Rory McIlroy here, playing some of the best golf that anybody's ever played, and you can see just how stable.